Hey, let's give old Bruce a round of applause. Everything starts with one individual who's willing to go out and make it work. It's entirely appropriate that we would start the celebrations before we actually get the proclamations through the nation. That's the way almost all of our holidays have ended up. People started doing them, and then the government decided to go ahead and recognize it. So appreciate you getting this first annual kicked off. I'm sure that we're going to be able to get this recognition because the nation not only forgot, they turned their back on a lot of us young people that went there. I graduated, I suspect, like a lot of you, in 1965. You may be in a year before or after. And I just grew up with these kids over in Hobbs. Erwin Cruz, when I was working in the oil fields, worked with Erwin's dad. Erwin was over at Heiser Junior High with me. Erwin didn't come home. He graduated with me in '65, and a year later was there and did not come home. Keith Rice's black kid is on the track team. Knew him pretty well. Graduated '65, wasn't on his way to college. They drafted him, and he didn't come back. And I was with Doug McPherson. He was my age, but his older brother Stan was 2 years older, was a captain. He didn't come home. George Nossoff didn't make it back. Just a whole lot of the kids that we were in class with, because the toughest years of the war were 66, 67, 68, began to wind down. I was here at New Mexico State. Did not think I was headed there. Drew a very low draft number in the fall of 1967, and they called me the next day and said, you got a low draft number in this lottery thing. Why don't you go to El Paso this morning? I said, you don't understand. I'm going to college. I'm going places. She said, you're going places. You're about to head to Vietnam. I said, well, that wasn't exactly what I had in mind. And I said, how about if I get into ROTC? They said, well, I'll give you 24 hours. So I went down here to New Mexico State, went to the Air Force ROTC, and the one thing I had grown up never wanting to do in my whole life, there's only one thing, it's because my older brother wanted to do it and I was scared to death, was flight. So I went down there to Air Force ROTC, and they said, we'll let you go into ROTC, but you got to go into.
You made a good model. I shot a couple of
you.
you.
That ain't working. This is just a bad deal. So I went back to my dorm room, and 24 hours to the dot, Dr. Badger, she was about this tall, she called up and I said, you get in that ROTC, son? I mean, I started in the middle of the sentence when you're really nervous like you do, and said, you don't understand, ma'am, they're killing pilots, and they only need pilots. And she said, they're killing them everywhere, son. We're going to send you over there, and you get to El Paso this morning. I said, you give me 2 more hours? She said, you better get it done. I'm going to drive over and take you to El Paso. I said, okay. So I went down, got into Air Force ROTC, and ended up flying, and was in Vietnam 71, 2, and 3. I was there during the time that Jane Fonda went north, and I'll tell you, the anger still burns neck deep for me over the fact that she went up there and was literally a traitor at a time when we were doing what we were doing down south, and she was giving aid and comfort to the enemy, and no one ever called her hand on it. Still have strong feelings about that. But the worst thing was that, like every single one of you, as soon as I got back stateside, I pulled my uniform off, and I never wore it publicly. I never wanted to be seen as a member of the military. I was going through Los Angeles many times when we were making trips back here and delivering planes here, picking them up and carrying them back to the theater. And we never wore our uniforms because people were harsh. The nation had turned its back not on the policy, but on the young men and women. And no one ever said anything when we came home. No yellow ribbons, no nothing. So when I was just like you were, when we got home, pulled that uniform off, stuck it there. 30 years later, I had never mentioned to anyone, and a kid had looked up when I was running for Congress the first time. A kid here at New Mexico State said, why do you never talk about that publicly? I said, people don't care. He said, I beg to differ with you. They do care. And the American generation that ridiculed the military, made fun of them, had begun to lose power, and this new generation had evolved around, and he was exactly correct. People had begun to remember exactly what we ask our young men and women to do. When we put somebody in combat, you're asking them to sign a blank check up to and including the cost of their whole life. That's what we ask for young men and women in combat. And we never, never, never remembered the other half of the bargain. So today we announced a Veterans a council here, Advisory Council, to keep us a little bit closer in tune with it. But the real thing is, every day we ought to be remembering what we're asking young people in Afghanistan and Iraq to do. I think we're extending our tours too much for our young people in combat right now. I don't think that people who are doing those policies understand what it's taking out of the young man and woman and into the family. So I've got sharp differences with whoever believes that we should be taking the lead role in Libya. I think we're committing enough of our young people to Afghanistan and Iraq, and I think the rest of the world needs to stand up and put young people there in harm's way. They need to use their taxpayers to pay for that next conflict. We are doing enough. All of this is a long-winded way of saying, I want to be the first one today to tell you, welcome home, brother. God bless you.
Congressman, I also got one of these patches for you also.